Hey everybody, how are you? Can you guys hear me? Hey, Judy. How are you guys tonight? Hey, Dee. Hi, CJK. Hi, Allie. Hey, Just Pam. How you doing? Hey, Corgi Mama. Hey, Miranda. Good to see you. Hey, Corgi Mama. Thank you so much for the super sticker. So much appreciated. Thank you. Hey, Judy. I hope you have a really great weekend. Hey, Digital. Always good to have you here. Hey, Purdue RN. Welcome, welcome. DGR Dave. Good to have you. Hi, Sasha. Good to have you as well. Oh, that's too bad, Dee. Hey, Tech Death. How are you? Good to see you. Hey, AJ. Welcome. So glad you're here with us tonight. Yeah, it's tough, Judy. It's such a hard night for them when they have to listen to all those explosions. It's just awful. It scares them so bad. At least it did mine. Hey, country girl. Hey, Paris07. Good to have you here. So glad to see all of you. So what's happening so far this weekend? Everybody having family time or what's going on? Can you guys hear me okay tonight? I'm just checking my microphone. Since it's new, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Just let me know in the chat if you would, if you can hear me tonight. And if it's clear, that's my hope. Paris, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. Hey, Truth Justice, welcome. Hey, John, how are you? Good to see you here. Thanks, you guys. Thank you so much. Be sure to like and share my video. We have a visitor. My Finn is up and about tonight, so he may entertain us later. Oh, that's cool, CJK. Do not step on the keyboard. He likes to be involved in everything. Yeah, you do. I know. Most of the time he's sleeping when I'm doing this, but tonight he seems to want to crawl on me. So I'll try to do this one-armed for a bit. I don't like to not give him attention when he wants it. Well, I hope everybody is having a good weekend. I spent today doing a little bit of research on a couple of new cases that I'm looking at. But I wanted to go back and really talk about a couple of things with Delphi. One of the things that I've been noticing on social media, pretty much everywhere, is there's really a lot of people that are not focusing on law enforcement's direction with the clients anymore. I see a lot of people kind of moving away from that. And I was kind of surprised by it a little bit, but I do know that when things get quiet in the case and we haven't heard any really big new information for a while, that people start looking in other directions because they don't feel maybe the police are still focused on that information. And exactly, Miranda. And one of the things that upset me when that information about Ron Logan was, sorry guys, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do this. Especially when the Ron Logan stuff was dropped. I couldn't believe, and we've talked about this here before, but I couldn't believe how everybody kind of jumped at that, and especially the national news and the local news outlets. They just went crazy. They even went as far as saying that that the murder sheet had broken the case. And I was just appalled at that, actually, because there's no way that the information about Ron Logan's search warrant broke this case. That is information that's 5 years old. It was, back in March of 2017. And, law enforcement had plenty of time to take a look at him. And I believe they really did. I think it's apparent. Hey, KA, welcome. Hey, Jen from the suburbs. Always good to see you. Thank you for coming. And I just think that, we have to take a look at the evidence. We have to go back and pay attention to what the evidence is, what evidence we know. And I thought we could talk a little bit about evidence tonight, in particular. Hold on a second. Let me put him down. Get down. Go get in your bed. He makes me too hot. Okay, so I want to first, those are the things that I thought we would talk about tonight. But as always, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about the missing person case that I want to talk about, the missing person that I'm going to feature. And she's from Georgia and she's only been missing a few days. I don't know if any of you have heard about her, but she's autistic and her name is Kaylee Jones. So give me a moment to share my screen with you so we can learn about her. So this is a picture of Kaylee. And so Kaylee went missing in Georgia. She's autistic. Her parents feel that her condition left her vulnerable to online predators who may have lured her away from home. And when I heard her story, it reminded me so much of Abby and Libby as far as the luring. So I wanted to talk about her. She's 16 years old. They believe that her parents believe it's highly possible that she's a victim of sex trafficking. How terribly sad. if that's true. But she was last seen near Whooping Creek Church Road in Carrollton, Georgia on June 14th. According to a release from the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, despite working diligently around the clock, investigators say they are not close to finding her, and she does require medical care. Her parents, Daniel and Brenda Jones, fear their daughter, who is autistic, may have fallen prey to sex traffickers after meeting internet users with ill intent, according to CBS's Atlanta affiliate WGCL TV. My wife found she was talking to 4 or 5 guys via Snapchat. Just a second, guys. I'm going to cough. Hold on. I'm sorry. The parents took their daughter's phone away 2 days before she disappeared. Hold on a second, guys. I'll be right back. Sorry, guys. It's been a bad day today for my asthma. Okay, let's see. And they felt that she was susceptible to what they called online grooming. They prey on these kids, and it's sickening, but it's a reality, Mr. Jones said of online predators per WGCL. And all we can do as parents is to train our kids. Kaylee's parents said goodnight to their daughter on the evening of June 14th and found her bed empty in the next morning. How frightening. Carroll County officials say investigators are keeping busy by reviewing data from Kaylee's electronic devices and have been in contact with those she last had contact with on those devices. In an update on June 20th, the sheriff's office said there were many unknowns in this case, such as where Kaylee might have been headed, what she was wearing, and who could have possibly accompanied her. They did, however, say that Kaylee could possibly be with someone she has met through certain apps online. Oxygen.com reached out to the sheriff's office to ask for an update, but did not receive an immediate response. It is gut-wrenching knowing she's out there somewhere and not knowing where she's at, said Kaylee's father. All the worst thoughts come to our minds. She is our daughter, and we desperately want her back. She is a big, huge part of us. Kaylee is listed as 5'8", weighing about 135 pounds. She has brown hair, brown eyes, and may be carrying a dark blue book bag with a horse on the front. The bag possibly contains the words Motzi or Kaylee. Relatives say she may have been wearing black tennis shoes or Converse footwear. Carroll County officials say she is without a vehicle or a phone. We continue to receive tips and possible sightings, and none of those have been substantiated as of this time, according to the sheriff's office. Please share and help bring Kaylee home. Someone has seen her and knows where she is. Anyone with information is urged to contact investigator Kim Briggs at 1-770-830-5916 or email her at kbiggs@carrollsheriff.com. And again, I'll show you her picture. And there is a picture of Kaylee. And it's sad she's autistic. I have an autistic grandson who is will be 16 in October, so close to her age. And it frightens me to think of him out there. I mean, he's very high functioning, and some people may not notice that he would be autistic, but there's still things that he's not great at. And one of them is knowing who to trust. So that would really have me scared. And I'm really scared for this little girl. I'm just really scared for her. So I plan on definitely following her case, because it's just kind of hit home with me. So I hope everybody's doing well, like I said. And AJ, thank you so much for sharing the Stop Trafficking Us Facebook page. That is awesome. There is just so much. We've talked about it the other night when I was on, about these kids and how vulnerable our children are, and how we really do have to start being more diligent and more careful with what they're doing online. Our grandchildren, as grandparents, we need to be there to help support the parents, because a lot of them are working so much, and they just need help, and to help do this and talk to them, talk to your grandchildren. In this day and age, we just have to. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. And to think that predators prey on kids like this that have these kind of disabilities is just more disgusting to me. I mean, it's bad enough that they get any child, but to really prey on these kids that don't have real good social skills in the first place, it's really sad. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for your patience. I do apologize. I haven't had any issues all day long, really, where I've had to use my inhaler or anything. But who knows? It always happens at night. It just does. And especially when I want to start talking. But you know what, Digital? I just saw that. I'm going to put this up here. So Sasha thinks that he's, or Digital says, Sasha, I think the Keegan Kline transcript only had enough evidence in it to apply pressure and get everybody talking. We still don't know even a third of what law enforcement knows about Keegan and Tony. And that is absolutely 100% factual, what he just said, what Digital just said. Because there is so much that we just don't know. When you go back through the affidavit for Keegan's arrest and you look at everything that they got off of those devices, if we refresh our memories and we go back and look, all the things that they were doing when they were supposedly in Las Vegas, the searches that were being done, looking to see how long DNA remains on a body. There were just a lot of really strange searches, especially for a pair of individuals who left town very suddenly after the murders and were doing some really odd behaviors during that time. To me, it's not coincidental. To me, it means that there was a lot going on there and that we don't know. The fact that Keegan told the investigators when they were interrogating him about this trip, and he was like, well, we found this cell phone in this rental car and it just happens to have CSAM on it. Really? I mean, just the way that he lied and tried to get out of the questions that were being put forth to him during that interrogation. He got himself so messed up in his own lies, which that's what happens to people. Hey, Teresa Fountain, good to see you. True Crime Web, thank you for being here. That's what happens with these people, especially with people who lie a lot and they get tripped up. They forget what lies they've told to whom, and they end up getting caught. I said all along, once we learned about the Klines, that it seemed pretty strange to me that the two of them took such a large amount of time to create this, how do I want to say it? This fabricated life, basically, that Keegan supposedly had in Las Vegas, because it was fabricated. They went back 2 years later and started making posts on Facebook to make it seem and appear that he was living in Las Vegas and had not been home. We know that's not true. And those are weird behaviors for someone who's innocent of a crime. Why would they be doing that otherwise? Who were they trying to make believe this information? To me, that's evidence. To me, that may be circumstantial evidence, but it's still evidence. It's evidence of very odd and peculiar behavior, and they were both doing it. Tony was doing it, and so was Kagan. And that leads me to believe that either Tony knew the stuff that Kagan was involved in and may possibly have been his alibi, or Tony was the culprit in all of this, or they did it together or whatever, and participated in this grooming and trying to meet girls online. And the more you think about it, and the more you look at the evidence, it certainly points to that. Because if you go back and listen to the transcripts of what they pulled off of the phones, and when they were looking at all of the Anthony Schatz stuff, where Anthony Schatz was communicating with girls and having multiple conversations, and not only Anthony Schatz, but Emily Ann especially, were talking about having Anthony Schatz was talking to these girls about them having a relationship or a sexual encounter with his father. That seems extremely strange to me. I think it points directly to either the person that was behind the Anthony Schatz account was not a son speaking for his father, but it was actually the older adult pretending to be a young person and talking that way, because it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, it would have to be a very, very dysfunctional relationship for the two of them to be acting together. And I'm not saying it's not possible, because it is possible, but we have to look at probability. What's the probability? Law enforcement pointed in a direction during those interrogations of Kagan Klein. And what they were pointing at was Tony. They told Kagan over and over again in that interrogation, we don't believe that you're responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. But they believe that he knows who is. And I believe that they were telling him it was his dad. Now, I'm not saying it's not unheard of for a father and son to be participating in this sort of activity together. I'm sure it's happened. I just know how dysfunctional it would be. And when you go back and you look at what was happening in the house with these conversations, because they know for a fact that the Anthony Schatz account was created by Kagan. They know that absolutely. And they were following these conversations that they were having within the house. And they also know for a fact that someone else in that house was also using that account. So with that being said, there were only 2 people living in the house. So that means that they are looking at Tony Klein, and they do believe that he was involved in this, and meeting girls and trying to have these relationships with these minor children. And it bothers me that so many people dismiss it as it's no big deal. It's not them, can't be them. And I've talked to you guys at length for months about the fact that I think that there is a faction on social media who does not want this case solved. And I still stand by that. And I believe they're the ones behind the narrative of don't listen to law enforcement. Kagan Klein and Tony Klein are not responsible for anything. It can't be them. And I'm just floored by it. I know other people say different things about people who believe the other way. I've heard them call them all kinds of names, and I don't do that on my channel. I'm not here to put people down or call people names for things that they believe. But I do know that it's ridiculous to me, because we have to go by the evidence. Sorry, guys, hold on a second. I'm looking for thought I had one here for whatever reason. Here we go. Okay, I'm good. So I'm sure you guys have all kinds of ideas about it, as you know, and everything, but I just don't understand why people refuse to listen to law enforcement. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I've always been a person who believes that you should look at the facts whenever you're looking at a criminal case or any kind of mystery type of thing. You have to look at the facts first and follow them and see where they lead you. We've talked about on my channel that, we may not like where the evidence points. We might not like how it looks to us of what the evidence is saying, but you still have to follow it. I mean, we've heard the families. We heard Anna say, "My God, I hope it's not somebody we know." She made that comment at the 5th anniversary interview that she did. And you can understand how heartbreaking it would be if it turned out to be somebody that they actually know. But we can't deny what evidence they're showing us and what evidence police has allowed to get out there, because it is all about the Kleins. And they have to be careful. And Sally Ann is right on. Arrests are easy. A conviction takes time. You can make an arrest, but you have to be able to make that arrest stick. And if you can't, then you have to let them go. And, we've seen this recently in the Suzanne Morphew case. They arrested her husband. They believe he's guilty. He was in jail for it. And they had to let him go because they don't have enough evidence to prosecute him right now in a court of law. And when you go to court with a criminal case such as a double homicide, the prosecution wants to make as positive as they can be that they're going to get a conviction. Trust me, when the prosecutors went to court with OJ, they thought that they had a slam dunk case against him. And as it turned out, they didn't have a slam dunk, did they? And so just because you have DNA evidence, just because you have this evidence or that evidence, doesn't mean that it's a slam dunk. It doesn't mean that you might not end up having problems explaining certain things. And in this case, there are so many variables. The digital evidence alone, in my opinion, could be something that could be easily fought with a very good defense attorney. by stating who else had access, they're gonna definitely bring that up, as who else would have had access to those devices. Kagan said it in the interviews. He threw his friends under the bus. I apologize if you guys hear fireworks outside my house, but they are exploding them close by. But the public and we in general seem to have this idea in our head that these cases should be easily solved, that, it should be done and over with, and they should already know who this is. I believe they know. I do. But I don't believe that they have enough to put it into the court system and make sure that they get the conviction. And they only get one chance at it, as we've talked about. I think that there's an alibi that they need to break. We've heard a lot of things about the Ron Logan search warrant, and that was what all the things that were brought up during that information. And it definitely looked to me like the FBI was looking at him heavily for a number of reasons. He was trying to get an alibi for the time the girls disappeared and would have been murdered before anyone knew that there had been an abduction and a murder. And that's highly circumstantial evidence against him. Why would you do that? Why would anybody be trying to alibi themselves for a time frame that nobody is aware yet that there's been a murder or a double homicide? So that was a red flag to law enforcement, and especially to the FBI and the agent who wrote the my brain tonight is funny. The search warrant for his property. I go back to what took him so long to search Ron Logan's property? What took them so long to get a search warrant? They waited weeks before. Why would they have not done that immediately when the girls were found on his property? All the waiting that you do, I mean, everybody knows about the TV show for the first 48 hours. It's critical in any crime, that first 48, and what you do and what you choose to do during that time. And I just, I just wonder, like I said, why they didn't do that. Robert Ives talks about not only all of the search warrants that they were doing, but they did a lot of subpoenas for records and information. They were pulling cell phones. They were getting all of the cell phones within that trail area that day. They needed to have those records so that they could eliminate people and find out who they were, why they were there, all of those things. And I've, this, Dave, I disagree with this. You can't get a ping that close. There's no way they pinged his phone right at the girls. No way. First of all, it's a very rural area. There's only 2 cell phone towers. Their pings aren't going to be that precise. I've never heard of anybody being able to ping a phone that precisely. So I don't believe that. Now, I do believe that it's possible that they pinged his phone on his property, outside his house or somewhere in the vicinity, but they didn't ping his phone at Abby and Libby's body. They just didn't. Impossible. Don't have that technology. And especially right now, at this time back in 2017, they didn't have that technology to be able to do that. So there's a lot of reasons. I mean, he had people out there searching all over his property for these girls. There could have been all kinds of reasons for him to be out there that night. When they said at 10 o'clock or whatever, when his phone pinged outside. And I'm just like, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. There's a lot of things that could be explained there. So, yeah, I just feel like releasing all the stuff about Ron Logan was, I mean, obviously it gave us a little bit more information, but to me, it's just made everything even more muddy for a lot of people, because a lot of people have just latched onto it and thought, oh, this is the answer. It's him. And it's not. And, you know, I just don't see it. I just don't see it being him. I just never have. I've just never ever felt like it was Ron Logan. What happened last night, Lynn? Why did you get discouraged last night? What happened? Can you tell me what happened? I'm not aware. Exactly, CJK. They said that the phone was traveling and it wasn't. It was bouncing from tower to tower, but it's because they only have two small. The town is small. And so, you have to understand how those cell phone towers work and the pings work. So they have evidence that Tony Klein, or that Kagan Klein, was at his grandparents' house that day during that time. They have phone evidence that he was there. That's in the transcripts. That's in the transcripts from the interrogation. So, if they had a ping that Tony was in the vicinity of the girls or the vicinity of the bridge, we would have an arrest. I firmly believe that. So I don't think that they have that. I think it's very possible that he has a really airtight alibi, and they need to break that. Sasha says that Ron Logan stuff says they were onto a potential digital element to the crime early. Yeah, I do believe that, because something at that crime scene that they recovered led them to the two addresses that they went to first. So there definitely was a digital element. And it was probably the last people that Libby was texting with or chatting with or whatever on her phone. Well, I thought that too, that's where he was at, but I just know what's in the affidavit from the transcript. It talks about his grandparents being at his grandparents' house. So I think he told them that he was at his friend's house or wherever at that place. Yeah. And I agree with Michelle on this. I definitely think that they possibly may know the person or are affiliated with them somehow with the whole CSAM mess. Very, very possible. But like I said, we have to go with what law enforcement is showing us and has shown us. They went hard at Kagan in those interviews about it. And then they turned right around and told him, we know that it's not you. So they gave up a lot in that. One of the things I wanted to talk about when we were talking about evidence, hold on one second and let me get this stuff here. We don't know much of anything as far as the evidence that they took from the crime scene. I can tell you that there's usually extremely tiny fragments of evidence found at crime scenes. It can be hairs, it can be fibers from carpeting, from clothing. It can be pieces of glass. It can be just tiny, small particles. And that's what's called trace evidence. We don't know what they collected that day or after. They were out there for a long time collecting. And somebody mentioned on a Reddit post recently, we do know that they collected a cigarette butt, at least one, because that was on the RTV6 helicopter footage when they were calling for the evidence bags for the clothing that they found in the creek, and they found a cigarette butt. And I was thinking about that afterwards, and somebody recently had posted about it on Reddit. What if Bridge Guy isn't a smoker, but he knows someone who is, and he brings a cigarette butt with him to throw off law enforcement with DNA? I had thought about that. I thought, that would be a really easy way for somebody to throw things off. One of the other things that I recently read in the Ron Logan information, they describe Bridge Guy as a heavy person, upper body heavy. And I thought that was interesting because what they had listed as his height and weight for so long on the wanted posters didn't really allude to that too much. And I was like, wait a minute. So when you look at what they were talking about with Ron Logan, they were talking about somebody who had a bigger upper body type physique. And both the Kleins fit that bill, just so you know. But getting back to that, traditionally, when we think of evidence, we think of DNA, we think of fingerprints, footprints. We know they have footprints because the searchers that found the girls were led there by a set of footprints. That's what they followed. They followed a set of footprints to the girls. Now, there is a reason that they went to the Indiana Packers and took out a pair of boots. The boots that they took out are those rubber boot type boots that you wear, waiters kind of, if you're going to be on a floor that's going to be wet with something, whether it be bodily fluids from pigs or whatever. It's you're around water or any kind of wet. That's the type of boots that these were, that they carried out of Indiana Packers. And we know that because they carried them out and they were able to be seen. They were photographed by the reporters that were there covering that bomb threat. And so we know they took those. And I don't believe it had anything to do with the bomb threat. I think that they were looking for footprints. And they were looking for a certain size and a certain type of boot. So, it wasn't a river, it's a creek. But yeah, that something made them go to the Packers. There is some evidence that they had that sent them to Indiana Packers, whether it was a tip or whether it was something that they saw or felt at the crime scene that made them go there to look at boot prints. Some of the other trace evidence that you can find that would be considered trace evidence can be soil, which we know there would be a lot of that because obviously that's where the girls were. They were in that, So I wouldn't be surprised if they took soil samples or if they took, some of the leaves and all of that, especially if there was any DNA left on them, which it sounds like there was. Some laboratories consider fire accelerants as trace evidence as well. I found that to be interesting when I was looking at trace evidence today. So that goes back to speaking about flora and with everything. Exactly, digital, more like rain boots. So Tamara, thank you so much. And you know what? It's the cemetery always has been this nagging thing to me. I know that a lot of people have talked about the gentleman with the pickup truck and the lost keys and being parked there and all of that, and how he was in the way and they needed him to move and all of this. Pat Brown, I believe, is his name. And Becky came right out and said, he didn't have anything to do with this. I still don't understand why that truck was parked there when it was parked there. And I would really like an explanation for that one. That's things that I think about when when I'm thinking about stuff. But they look at footwear, they look at tire tracks. People have talked about, well, what if they rode four-wheelers? Well, there would be tracks if they rode through the woods. Now, if they came through the water, that would be different, right? They wouldn't have any evidence of that. That would be really weird to see, I would think, in winter, but I'm sure it's possible. I've never gone four-wheeling in the wintertime, so I don't know how that works, but there were upwards of 500 people that were out there searching for the girls. Now, they were not all at the bridge. There were some in town. They had them out in cornfields. Um, they had people, I think, from the Patty's house all the way to Delphi, because Mike and Becky live out in the country, on the outskirts of Delphi. And so I think from their house in towards the city is where they had all the people searching. So there was a lot of people out in cornfields. They weren't all at the Monon High Bridge and the trails. And Becky described it as just thousands of lights. It's like you could just see all of these flashing flashlights, and it looked like stars or fireflies. So, and I agree, Michelle, I'm still confused about that. I mean, I think we're going to continue to talk about that until that finally gets explained as to why they did not find them that night. It almost makes me believe that someone said, don't search there, we already did. It's almost like someone pushed the searchers away from where the girls actually were and said, go search here, we've already searched there, and they're not there. Hey, Brad, so good to see you. Thank you so much for your super sticker. So appreciated. Because it just doesn't make any sense to me that they wouldn't have been found. It's right directly over the hill from the cemetery, and there were people in the cemetery. There were people on Ron Logan's property. They would have come right down that hill, right next to the cemetery. That's his property, and you walk right down it. He took Alexis McAdams and walked her right straight down to the crime scene. He also did it, I believe, with Barbara McDonald from HLN. He walked her down there as well. The same path. His dogs even knew the path. His dogs walked that way with him. And so it wasn't like it was this really hard from Ron's property I'm talking about. It was like a straight shot down that corner past the cemetery. Thank you, Broken Pinky Promises. I like your name. That's really cool. Thank you so much. My little 4-year-old grandson today told me, he said, do you like my pinky promise grams? And I thought that's made me think of that when I saw your name. But yeah, it just doesn't, there's just something there that doesn't make sense. That is not as far in deep into the woods as people make it sound like. And I just think they would have found them. It just doesn't make any sense that they weren't. So so there's, when we were talking about circumstantial evidence, there's been a lot of crimes that have been adjudicated on circumstantial evidence, and they were able to get a conviction. Do prosecutors like those cases? Of course not. It's not the strongest of evidence, but it is possible to get it, to get a conviction with it. And it just definitely depends on how much circumstantial evidence that we have. Between the physical evidence that we have, we've heard so many different things. Robert Ives said that there was a lot of physical evidence, but not the type that you would expect or the type that you would think, which is very confusing to many of us. What is he talking about there? If it's not normal type of physical evidence, what is it? So, yeah. Digital says, I think those boots were taken very early in the investigation and are either no longer relevant or can't be proven to be the killers. Many searchers walked that area before they collected boot prints. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying, though, Digital. If many searchers walked in that area, the area that we're talking about, they would have found the girls. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's a set of prints, there's a set of footprints that were followed by those searchers that afternoon at noon on the 14th. They followed those footprints and walked right to the girls. And that's how they found them. And so, hey, Cop Facts, how are you, Perry? So good to see you here. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Robert Ives told us that the crime scene was unusual to the effect that you would want to photograph it. It was so unusual. And you know, we talked about that. I watched a Ken Maines video it's been probably a few days now. But he did a video recently on Delphi and on the new information that has come out, and because his subscribers asked him to. And he said the first thing that he wanted to say was that they misused the word posing versus staging, and that he believes that it was the bodies were posed. And he doesn't necessarily believe that the crime scene was staged. There are two different terminologies used. And see, I said that back 2 years, 3 years ago when I was doing research on signatures. I said that Robert Ives didn't know what he was saying because he could not call what he saw in the crime scene signatures. That it can only be a signature if you can put that, whatever you're looking at another crime. There has to be another crime for you to call it a signature. And they told us that they didn't have any other crimes that they could link this case to. Early on, they were saying that they, as far as we know, this is a single incident. This is not associated with any other crimes out there. And people don't understand that, A lot of people don't do the research or don't know what a signature is. And they just listen to a law person as a prosecutor say something like that, and they're going to believe it. So we don't know that there's truly signatures in this case. And they say that is how do they put it when they're talking about trying to go, I don't have my one notebook that has all of my signature stuff in it, but I don't have that out, and I should have. Becky talked about, this was one of the things I want to talk about too. Becky and Mike did a really in-depth interview with Gray Hughes. And in that interview, Becky talks about how everybody was putting them down for letting the girls go to the trails, and that this place was so remote and so off the beaten path, which in my mind, it kind of is. But to the locals, It wasn't. And the reason that it wasn't is because for years they had been collecting money and utilizing the McCains to restructure and rebuild a trail system in Delphi and around Delphi that was going to bring in tourism um, to the Wabash Canal area. That was what they were hoping for. So the trails were actually being advertised. And one of the things that Becky said is on the light posts in town, they had these flags that they would change. And I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but they're those banners that a lot of places and a lot of cities put up for all different kinds of things. Here we have them. We have a Air Force base here, and so they will put them up with pictures of people who were in the Air National Guard here, stuff like that. But you can put them up for anything. And she said that they had them up advertising the trails, and so people were coming from everywhere, Indianapolis, from all over, to walk on the trails. And people felt safe. There were joggers out there all the time, and people would go out there with their families. The girls had been out there many, many times, Kelsey and Libby, because that's what they did. That's what kids did, as Mike said. Kids were out there before them. Kids were out there while they were there, and kids were out there after. And so yes, KA, I believe they could be misusing it, at least in the beginning. And they talked about the girls being posed. So there is a difference. If you look it up, you will see that there's a difference between posing and staging. Staging is trying to make a crime look like something it's not. Posing is doing something to the victim or whatever that doesn't have anything to do with the crime itself. It's something that the perpetrator needs to do or is trying to send some sort of a message by posing a victim. And like I said, you cannot have a signature in a crime unless you have a serial killer or a person who's committed another crime like it. That's when you have a signature. It's like, oh, he did this before. This is his signature. That's what I'm trying to get at here. So, yeah, you talk about why they do them. Sure, they do them because it's something that they're compelled to do. It has nothing to do with the murder or committing the murder. They don't have to do it to facilitate that, but it's something inside their head that they're fixated on that makes them do it. So that's where I'm trying to get at here, to make you understand. So when Ted Bundy killed the very first time, he did not have a signature because he'd never killed before. But once he killed and then killed again and killed in the same manner, the same way, and left the bodies or the victims in the same manner, there was a signature. And then each time he did it, those were his signatures. And that's how a signature works in crime. And I just believe for somebody to look at a crime scene and say, oh, that's a signature, you don't know that until you go back and you start looking at databases to see if there's other crimes with similar MO, similar whatever. And they didn't know that by just looking at the crime scene that day. And again, it's really easy to get terminology messed up because some people misuse the term. So if they thought that's what it meant, You know, they don't see those kinds of crimes in Carroll County, Indiana. So they weren't experts in signatures. I can guarantee you that. But, and so thank you, Digital, for that. Staging, hang on. Staging and posing both turn into staging, but the legal definition of a signature is that it has to occur at 2 or more crime scenes. Exactly. You can't have a signature unless you have 2 or more crime scenes. And that's what I've been trying to get at for quite a while, to get people to understand, to stop talking about it that way. We don't know what signatures he was talking about. I don't think there are any signatures. I think this may have been a first crime. If it was not his first crime, it was his first kill, perhaps. And he had committed other different types of crimes, possibly some sort of voyeurism, window peeping, maybe sexual assault. There's all kinds of things that he may have done prior to, but as far as murder, I think this was the escalation of his fantasy world. He fantasized about this for so long, and then boom, something happened that made him feel that he could do this now, and he felt comfortable doing it now. Everything lined up for him. So we don't know that there was something non-secular. We know that somebody said that. But we don't know for sure the details of what that may or may not be. So I'm still not 100% convinced that that's truth either. But there's so many different ways to go with this and to look at it. I just think we need to stay focused on what we know. We need to stay focused on the facts of the case and the evidence that's been presented to us. And right now, the evidence that we've been given points to Tony Klein and Kagan. What that means as far as them being the perpetrators, yeah, I know, Robert, I've said that, Sasha, I do. I'm still not positive, since he also said signatures, and there's no signatures in this crime. So I believe that as well. Robert Ives grew up in Carroll County. As far as I know, he didn't work anywhere else but Carroll County. And that's where his career was at. He grew up there. I think that it's hard for us as we look inward on this case from the outside. We have all these frustrating questions and all of these things that have been put out there in the public domain, things that we read about. We also watch videos, we listen to live streams, we read, stuff on Reddit, we belong in Facebook groups, whatever. And we hear all of these different ideas and thoughts and everything. And there's a lot of really good theories that have been put out on this case that you could look at and kind of get behind. But you can't put your POI, you can't check them off for all the boxes that need checked. You have to be able to check them for motive. You have to be able to check them for means. They have to have the means, the motive. You have to be able to put them at the scene, place them on the bridge. They have to be there that day. Not down in St. Louis or somewhere else where they've known to be and committed crimes, like some of our POIs that were thrown out there. But were they in Delphi that day? Can you place them there? No. So then you can't consider them to be a POI for Delphi. Those are the kinds of things that I'm saying. Those are the logic. That's where the logic and the critical thinking comes in. There's a lot of people who may look good for the crime, or you would think, man, this is a really bad guy. And he may be a really bad guy and do some really bad stuff, but he may not be Delphi's killer because you can't place him in Delphi that day. Michelle says, in my opinion, they weren't prepared for this kind of crime. Absolutely. And had no clue what they were doing. So they should have called in the FBI, the CIA, the UPS, COD, IOU, all those 3 letters. They should have called for everyone for help. And they did call for some, but not who you would think. The only reason I believe the FBI was on site that day was because he was actually there visiting his relatives. So he went. And it was one FBI agent. For the FBI to get involved in a state crime, the county, whoever's running the show, has to call the FBI and invite them in. The FBI cannot just come in to the state unless there has been some sort of crossing of state lines in the crime, or in this case, if there's CSAM involved and they're running a CSAM operation, they can probably cross information from that, but still, to investigate the actual murder, they have to be asked to do that in this case. These girls, and I did a video on this. You can go back and look at my videos on my YouTube channel. But the video that I did was the girls were high risk. In Indiana, there's laws, and there's laws for children and any individual who is deemed high risk that goes missing. And there are protocols that they are supposed to follow. And Tobe Lesenby did not follow them. He did not follow any of those protocols for a high-risk child that was missing. And Abby and Libby were considered to be that because of all the things involved, being outside, being in the middle of winter. There was just a lot of things. And he didn't follow the protocol for that. He did not list them as being high risk missing until the next morning. There's just all kinds of things. So to me, and I don't think it was purposeful. I just think it's kind of like Michelle said. They didn't have the wherewithal. They'd never done this before. They just never done this before. So they were overwhelmed. And hindsight's 2020. And they interviewed Tobe this year. And, if you watch that interview, you can see in his face, he says, I made mistakes. He goes, I regret not bringing in the dogs. I regret calling off the search. And you can see that he means that, everybody, it's I mean, it's real easy to um, to go at law enforcement and to yell at them. And of course, we've all done it. We all get upset with them. But one of the things, hey, Jennifer, good to see you. One of the things I think that we need to remember when we're looking at law enforcement and we're talking about Delphi is that it's really easy to be us sitting back and knowing what we know now and to be able to tell them how to do their jobs or that um, they didn't do their job well enough or right. And it is, Tamara, it is hard not to judge, but we need to be aware of it and really try hard to not be so critical. They're human beings. They're going to make mistakes. They're not perfect. Um, but I was talking to Michelle the other night on the phone, and I told her, if those had been my children that were missing out in the woods on a winter's night, you would have heard me screaming for miles and miles if they decided to turn around and tell everybody, well, you go home because you have to work tomorrow. I would have lost it. I would have absolutely lost it. And then I've had people in my chat say, well, people stayed out there though. They still had people searching, but not the professionals. They sent them home because the fire department were all volunteers and they all had other jobs to go to during the day. Hey, Allie, thank you so much for the super sticker. I so appreciate you. Thank you so very much. And it is really easy to be critical and stuff. And I know that at some point when this case finally comes to a close and we see who Bridge Guy is, he's revealed to us, and they get him and they can put him in jail, or however it ends up, being for him, whatever they end up doing to him. There'll be books written about this case. There will be an analysis of this case like you've never seen before. I already have heard that they use this case as a training in Quantico. So if they're using this case for training, you can guarantee you that it's going to be written about, for sure. Because one of the things is they don't have, we don't have a lot of double murders to begin with. And then to have a double murder of two girls in broad daylight on a remote trail in the middle of the Midwest in a town less than 3,000 people is unheard of. Tamara, thank you so much. Thank you so very much for your super sticker. And Allie, you are so nice. You are so nice. I don't know that I have a great radio voice, but I certainly appreciate you saying it. And I really am trying to advocate for them. And I'm glad that you recognize that. Jennifer, you're perhaps right. Helen Keller could see more. It's difficult. It really is difficult. One of the things that I wanted to tell you guys, because I know we forget this, and you guys are awesome. Jess Pam, thank you so much for your super sticker. Thank you, thank you. How do we know time of death is at 3 on the 13th and not 3 a.m. on the 14th? Because it was said in the Erskine texts, it was said that the coroner said everything was over by 3:30. And it's always been assumed. Law enforcement at one point also said that everything was over by then, as well. So that's why we've got the time of death there. We don't know for sure because we have never seen the coroner's report. And once we have the autopsy report, that will be verified, but we're not going to see that unless it's revealed at trial. Be prepared that we may not ever see it. So just know that. Amy, thank you so much for your super sticker. I so appreciate it. Is that a little black kitty on your shoulder too? It kind of looks like it. I love kitties and I love my black cat. So, Amy, I hope you're right. I do feel it's ready to blow wide open as well. And I just keep saying I hope so. I really do. Yes, KA, I do have PayPal. Can one of my mods drop my PayPal, please? So KA can find it. Oh, here it is. It's right here. KA, it's on the screen. That's my PayPal. But yeah, I just love them. So, one of the things that I wanted to bring up was, we always, Woodland Star, thank you so much for my super sticker. I certainly appreciate you as well. And thank you so much for being here. How kind of you guys. Yeah, YouTube does. YouTube does take a third of it. Yeah, they do. But anyway, with that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the girls, about Abby and about Libby, because we talk about this case all the time and we really don't talk about the girls. We don't talk and remember what they were like. And I wanted to end tonight to do that a little bit. Because when I was re-listening to the interview with Mike and Becky, Becky was so excited to talk about Libby and how she was. And she talked about how she was just a gentle soul. And I can kind of see that now after all these years of following the case and reading about her. She was very laid back and she was a defender and a protector. And she described her as her father. She said that Derek is the same way. And Libby kind of emulated that from her father. And she thought a lot about a lot of people. She wanted to help people. She wanted to make people feel good. She liked to make people laugh. One of the first things that she would do, she'd come bouncing into the house when she would get out of school and just immediately sit down to make chocolate chip cookies for everybody. And she would just love to do that and to brighten their day. And Becky talked about the Post-it notes. She was a girl who used Post-it notes to uplift people. She would just write little notes and stick them for them to find. And what an amazing Tamara, this interview is not new. This interview was done, I want to say, probably 2018, maybe. But you can find it on Gray Hughes's channel. Gray Hughes Investigates. He's the one who did the interview with them. And it's a really good interview. It's worth listening to. You get a feeling and a sense of Mike and Becky, and especially Mike. He talks about the girls. He did a lot of working out with Libby with all the sports that she did. He put up a volleyball net so that she could practice her strikes because she wanted to get better and better at volleyball. He did all kinds of things to help her improve what she was doing. And um what is everybody talking about 3,000 people? I'm confused. um what's the 3,000 about? You guys, what is 3,000? But anyway, so she was really good. She really wanted to make people feel good. She left a note for her band teacher telling them how wonderful they were. Just stuff like that. She was just a really kind soul. And Abby was very shy. But according to Kelsey, she wasn't shy around her. She was shy when she was around other adults. And Becky described her that when Libby met her, they played in band together for 2 years. They sat next to each other because they both played the alto sax, which I find just incredibly cool because it's a very cool instrument and it's not easy to play. And for those two girls to be playing it, I just thought that was incredible. And so anyway, they played the alto sax together in the band, and then they started playing volleyball together. And so that's like, Abby loved volleyball. She excelled at volleyball. She really liked it. And Abby she loved to be outdoors. She loved crafts. She had a whole closet at home full of stuff to do for crafts. She was always making something. She loved to paint. They both did. And I'm talking like painting pictures. And they would paint things. Becky described that the Sunday night they spent together at Libby's house overnight, they were working on a painting together of a chocolate bar. So they had painted it was brown, and then they had chocolate written on it. So yeah, it was it was interesting to see what they did together, how much they were alike in the things that they liked. They both had decided what they wanted to do with their lives, 8th grade, and they already knew. Libby wanted to go into forensics, and Abby wanted to go into law enforcement. So they already had decided that and had already started thinking about their classes and what they were going to do to facilitate that. But these girls were good girls, and they definitely left an imprint on the community, on the people who knew them and loved them, and they've made a huge imprint on all of us who have come to know them by following this horrific case and what happened to them. And everybody tends to forget them in that way, and the human part of it. And I think it's always good for us. Well, Tamara, I'm not sure that there's importance to it. I can just tell you that the book was a book that she happened to be reading. She wasn't reading it for school. It was just a book that she had decided to read. It's a little heavy. I've read it, and it's worth reading if you want to get an understanding of a 14-year-old girl and what she might be liking to read. But it's like I said, it's heavy. There's a lot in it, so be prepared for that. And the other thing too, I see the comments in the chat about Bridge Guy. Delphi is 2,900 people, and I don't necessarily believe that Bridge Guy has to be living in Delphi. we've talked about this before. Local doesn't mean Delphi City, city of Delphi. It does not. This whole area is a radius. There are so many little towns that are just a few miles from each other. And he could be in any one of those places. And you've got Lafayette that's not just 20 minutes down the road. He could be there. I mean, there's just so many things. When you're thinking of local, we're thinking of someone within a mile, certain mile radius. And it's, and that's why I'm doing this circle with my mouse. It's like, it can just be, it doesn't have to be definitely local to Delphi, the city. And they never said that. So I just think that that's why we could be looking at any of the outlying areas or outlying towns somewhere in that area. So, but yeah, guys, I'm going to give my voice a rest and say goodnight before I end up coughing all over you guys again. And I don't want to do that. But I hope you got something out of tonight. Hope you learned something. I think we had a good conversation. And it was really good to see so many new faces in chat. I'm so glad you guys came. I really, as you guys know, I've lost my own child, buried my own child, and those families are near and dear to me because they joined a club when those girls were murdered that no parent should ever have to be a part of. To bury your child is the worst thing that you could ever imagine having to do. And I think about them every single day, knowing that it's really, really hard. Mike described, he always had to go pick them up from their practices, and he would do that almost every day because they had practices of something, and they don't do that anymore. It's like 1 minute they're there and the next minute they're gone, and your whole world is turned upside down. So please keep them in your hearts and your good thoughts, because it's important. It's really important. They're hurting. And I want the families to have justice, and I want the girls to have justice. And I certainly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. We have a long weekend, so enjoy it. And for those of you that are not in the United States, I hope that you have a great rest of your weekend. And Paris 07, thank you so much. You are so kind. And I'm glad you're here. I'm so glad. And you guys all have a wonderful weekend. I will see you on Tuesday. And be safe out there. Good night, everyone.